I get the privilege of introducing Christi today, but in order to put her speech in context, I think I need to dive back in time. You know, I've always said that the John Deere business is a great business, but it's a bad business to die in. So back in my early 50s, I think that's probably the first time I started to come to grasp with my own mortality. I realized at that time none of my children were involved or seemed very interested in the equipment business. And that if something would happen to me, John Deere would be the one that would decide RDO's fate. So I got to thinking more and more about succession and decided at that time, after ruminating on this, that I would take it public and succession would take care of itself. That year was 1997. What seemed to be a very good idea at the time was both a blessing and a curse. The blessing was that the timing was good due to the fact that a lot of IPOs were going on, a lot of changes were made, and we raised a lot more money than we anticipated. The curse was that analysts expected continued growth through acquisitions. But John Deere quickly put the brakes on growth because they didn't want any one dealer getting too big. So we decided to go into other platforms of business, which put a lot of stress on the leadership of the organization. With the analysts pressuring us to meet quarterly expectations, the leadership, including me, became more and more focused on the financial results of the company instead of what's really important. And what's really important, which I was to find out, is the employees and the customers. With more and more emphasis on the financial results, you can guess what happened, and less on the people. We missed our quarterly expectations, and the stock got trashed. During that time that we were going through a struggle, there was only one region that was actually hitting its budget numbers. That region was the region that Christi was running at that time. She was hitting her numbers, but she wasn't talking about the numbers. She was challenging me and the board about the lack of focus on our culture. I actually have a letter that she wrote to me at that time. I shared that letter with one or two of the directors at that time, and the directors said, "Gee, it's too bad she's too young because she could run this company." Time goes on, we continue to struggle, and now we're coming up into late March of 2000. The chief operating officer of the company at that time was struggling to right the ship, but wasn't having very much success. The board determined that new leadership was in order. They decided that we should look internally, and they also realized that Christi was had the best performing region and always delivered her numbers. I can tell you that I couldn't have made the decision by myself, but the outside directors, and some of them are here today, made the decision to make Christi the Chief Operating Officer of RDO Equipment. Now, I can also tell you this, that the passing of wisdom doesn't always go one way. Generally, you think wisdom is passed from the older, more experienced person to the younger and the inexperienced. But I've learned that it goes two ways. Christi, in the months that followed, taught me many valuable lessons, and I'll give you two of them. One, and the first one is, you cannot grow the company faster than you grow your people. And that a great place to work is not only the right thing to do, but it will create great business results. And striving to be the best is a lot better than striving to be the biggest. Now, I can tell you years later, she not only righted the ship, but she has created and nurtured a culture that I am very proud of to be part of our family legacy. So at this point, as Paul Harvey says, I'll turn it over to Christi for the rest of the story.
Thank you, Dad. It's an incredible honor to be here at the Berry Auditorium in the Offutt School of Business. Please join me in a round of applause for my father. You have served as an exemplary leader, not only to this college, but this entire community. And you are the source of inspiration for the team members of RDO, and of course, to our family. Given the speakers that I'm following in this luncheon series, and the speakers that have been here the last couple of weeks, I am truly humbled to be here. Thank you all for coming today. Thank you to the business community, thank you to the college, and thank you, RDO team members. So back in 2001, when the board offered me the Chief Operating Officer position, I nervously accepted. I went home and I thought about our precarious financial situation. I thought about the leadership changes that were going to need to take place. And I wondered to myself, what did I just sign up for? And this began the journey of building and sustaining a responsible corporate culture. There have been a number of strategies that we've implemented over the last 12 years, but in the interest of time, I'm going to talk about the couple that have been the most impactful. And they are a stakeholder versus shareholder philosophy, and a great place to work culture based on servant leadership, transparency, personal growth, and above all, trust. So back to being nervous for what I'd signed up for. We were still a public company at the time, but I knew that only focusing on shareholder interest was not going to build a sustainable or successful business. So I made the decision that the leadership team going forward was going to center on focusing on employees and customers. And that was the beginning of our stakeholder approach. What you're looking at on the screen is our stakeholder wheel. You'll see this in any RDO location that you go into. It'll be a poster on a wall, in a break room, or as you enter the store. But it's really not just a poster on the wall. We use it, and we ask the managers to use it whenever they're making critical decisions in the company. So at the center is RDO, and the next ring is composed of our stakeholders, or those that have a stake at RDO. And they are our employees, our customers, our manufacturer partners, our owners, and the communities we do business in. When we are making a decision, we make sure we understand the impact to each of these stakeholder groups. We recognize that each of these stakeholders is important. They're connected and they're interdependent. And our job, and my job, is to seek to optimize value creation for all of them. The outer ring consists of our core values, which I'll touch on a little bit later. The stakeholder wheel is not just a philosophy, but it's how we measure our results. It's how we structure our communications, and it's the framework for our team members' annual reviews. The stakeholder scorecard contains metrics for each of our stakeholders. They're measured at the store, the region, and the company level, and they're discussed at our monthly open book meetings. These metrics are both leading and lagging performance indicators. The manufacturer partner metric, market share, and the owner metric, return on equity, are lagging performance indicators. The customer metric, Net Promoter Index, and the employee metric, survey results and action planning, are leading performance indicators. I'll get a little more into the employee stakeholder a bit later on my comments on developing our culture. So the stakeholder scorecard showcases the means and the results. I'll share a recent story that highlights our success as a stakeholder philosophy. A couple of weeks ago, at our most recent board meeting, one of our outside directors approached me and congratulated me on what had been a great financial year. He's been on the board for about 6 years. He's a former John Deere executive, and he's on a couple of other dealer boards. And what he said to me, he said, "Christi, you've been talking about this stakeholder approach since I've been on the board for the last 6 years. And I've got to be honest with you, and I'm a little embarrassed to admit this, but not only did I not really understand what you were talking about, but I didn't really buy into it." He said, "It's not until very recently that I now understand the why. When I compare RDO to other dealer organizations, RDO's performance is better. And within the industry and within John Deere, I hear over and over again that when people meet RDO team members, they're just a notch above other people and other organizations, particularly in their passion and their commitment to your organization." To me, that was a great testament to our balanced stakeholder approach. John Mackey, the CEO of Whole Foods, in his book Conscious Capitalism, that Mike Solberg referenced a couple of months ago in his speech, has a section called Stakeholders as the Essence of the Company. And he writes, quote, "Stakeholders make up a company. They include all the people who impact and are impacted by a business. We must honor them as people first before treating them according to the role they happen to be playing. They all contribute to the creation of value, and it's therefore vital that they share fairly in the distribution of that value." This balanced stakeholder approach is the definitive method at RDO to balance each of those that have a stake at RDO. And now I'd like to talk more specifically about employees as an RDO stakeholder and a great place to work culture. To reiterate what I mentioned earlier, I'll talk about the 4 critical components that I believe have helped improve our culture immensely. There's servant leadership, transparency, personal growth, and trust. Culture is not something that's tangible, but it's something that you feel, and it's definitely something that you experience. You know it when you see it. Sometimes I don't appreciate how far we've come until I walk into a store and visit with some employees. I'll give you an example. A few months ago, I was visiting our location in Fort Worth, Texas. I was talking to a group of technicians in our shop, and I quickly learned that a few of them had just recently come to work for us from the competition. At some point during the discussion, kind of out of the blue, one of the technicians said, "Ma'am, I just want to take this opportunity to thank you for RDO being a great place to work." And if you think my Texas accent's bad, you should hear my Australian one. But he went on to say that the leadership here in Texas, and his manager specifically, doesn't just treat him like a worker that turns wrenches, like they used to at his former workplace. At RDO, he's treated with respect, and he's looked at as an individual that does important work for our customers. And with that story as a backdrop, I'll talk a little bit about servant leadership and why I think it's so critical to building our culture. Most people probably consider RDO equipment to be in the tractor business. And although we sell greatly branded products like John Deere and Vermeer, we're actually in the service and customer solutions business. Frankly, and I'll look at my Titan friends in the room, our products are actually not that different from our competition. It's important in any business, but it's critically important in service businesses that the people closest to the customer are, and in our case, that's our technicians, our part specialists, and our account managers, that they're empowered to make the best decision for the customer. This empowerment at the field level at RDO comes from a servant leadership approach. And what do I mean by servant leadership? It's leaders who lead through mentoring and inspiring others. It's authentic leaders who care passionately about people and know how to build trust. It's leaders that rather than commanding or directing, they empower their teams with the tools and development to provide great customer service. Today, I work with a group of leaders and over 1,900 team members in 12 states that I'm so proud to be a part of. The leadership at RDO believes their job is to guide and serve. They do not spend their time in front of computers or in their offices, but they spend the vast majority of their time out in front of employees and customers, asking questions about how they can better serve and support the RDO stakeholders. Transparency. Transparency is certainly, I think, critically important as part of a responsible corporate culture. Every one of our locations has monthly open book meetings, and in these meetings, they review the overall business, including the financials of the departments and stores. Every RDO team member can go in our system and pull up a P&L of any department, of any store, or the company overall. During these open book meetings, there's always a discussion about how the team can impact these numbers and what's in it for them. We pay out a quarterly profit-sharing bonus to every parts and service team member. In the company video you just watched, you heard the phrase, "There are no secrets here," from an RDO team member. This is something I consistently hear from our RDO team members, particularly those that have recently come from other organizations. One of our true guiding principles is radical transparency for all of our stakeholders, but especially our team members. Recently, I was at our Imperial, California store, and a new team member approached me and said how happy he was to be at RDO. He had recently come to work for us. And I asked him, what is the single biggest difference between RDO and the place that he had worked at before? And he said, "There are no secrets here." So maybe he had just seen the company video, but he went on to say that at RDO he can ask any question, information is free-flowing, and the why behind decisions and processes is always explained. Personal growth. The other thing that's different about RDO is the amount of training we offer to our team members. John Deere has told us that on average we spend 3 times what the rest of the dealer channel does. And national studies show that we spend 15% more on training than comparably sized organizations. Being a learning organization is certainly something that I'm very passionate about. Over the last 12 years, I've certainly been challenged by our board on what the return on investment is with all this training that we do, except by Dr. Dovry, who is my #1 supporter of people development. But it's really, to me, it's about return on expectations. For example, we have a Management Institute program where company leaders spend 30 months learning what it means to be a leader at RDO. Our program is unique in that we don't use outside facilitators or purchase curriculum. We believe in leaders teaching leaders, and it's proven to be a great success. At a recent graduation, all the team members mentioned that the program has not only allowed them to become better leaders, but they felt they had grown as a person and a family member. I could share many testimonials from our graduates, but I chose one from Colby Gurkovich, an aftermarket manager from our Southern California region. And he wrote, "The Management Institute has had a big impact in my life. I've learned how to be a better leader by helping others see the bigger picture. And this doesn't stop at work. I believe I'm a better person in my personal life as well." Colby's one of many RDO frontline leaders who inspire their team to be the best. And he's also a great illustration of what my return on expectations for the program is all about. In addition to our investment in leadership development, every single team member at RDO has a learning plan that's set up at their annual review and discussed at their one-on-one meetings. We take learning very seriously. Trust. One of the first things I did in 2001 was an internal employee survey, and we had a really poor response rate. When I asked team members why they didn't fill out and return the survey, they told me that they didn't trust the process. I couldn't believe that people thought that their specific feedback would not be held confidential, or even worse, that there'd be repercussions for negative feedback. I realized there were significant trust issues in the organization. We now partner with the Great Place to Work Institute, and in the last survey, we had an impressive 91% response rate, and 95% of those respondents reported high trust in the organization. So how do we go about building trust over the last 12 years? A few things that top of mind are, we concentrated on building credibility, respect, and fairness. We worked on making sure managers delivered on their promises and avoid playing favorites. Through the survey, we continually measure if employees feel fairly compensated. We set a high bar for the fairness dimension, and the Institute tells us it's the hardest one to consistently score high on. We expect managers and leaders to actively communicate to their team members, which involves not only active listening, but explaining the why behind the decision. With our investment in training that I talked about earlier, we've been able to promote from within a much higher percentage of the time. And when team members are hired externally, our people want to make sure they're going to be a cultural fit. What I've learned is the single most important factor of being a high-trust workplace is that people feel valued and know that what they do and that their work matters. It's no secret we're a large organization. In fact, we're John Deere's largest dealer network. This plays in the mind of new team members when we acquire new locations. A few years ago, we acquired the John Deere store in Redfield, South Dakota. About 6 months after the acquisition, we brought the entire team up to our field support office here in town. And during the Q&A, one of the employees said to the group and said to me, "You know, when RDO bought us 6 months ago, I really worried that I'd just be a number in a large organization. And 6 months later, I feel more respected as an individual in the RDO family than he did as a single dealership experience. He saw more of the management and leadership team with RDO. He was better trained, and he felt like he had a voice that was really listened to." This made me really proud. I said I'd mention our core values. I certainly believe that to be a responsible corporate culture, you must be a values-centered organization. I'm not going to read ours one by one, but I'm confident that any RDO employee in this room or in our entire organization could tell you what our core values are and what they mean. But my favorite one is actually not up on the screen because it's one of our unwritten ones, but it's certainly a hallmark of being a great place to work, and that's having a lot of fun. On our most recent survey, we outscored the 100 best workplaces on the statement, "This is a fun place to work." So what does a good-natured, laughing at ourselves, practical joke place look like? Well, it looks like a service manager dressing up in a dress where his team produced great results. There's Jason. It looks like a scavenger hunt at our Management Institute graduation in Las Vegas. And as you can see, our leadership team takes themselves very seriously. Our CFO is doing the YMCA with the Elvis impersonators. Our EVP of Organizational Development looks like Rod Stewart. And maybe my favorite, our Director of Compensation and Benefits is a poster child of healthcare. Fun looks like a store bringing in a group of kindergarten students to the store. I have to mention our Texas store is constantly trying to out-barbecue themselves. And it looks like a Choice Awards trip where we honor individuals nominated by their peers for exemplifying our core values. And trust me, it's a really good time. And it looks like a South Dakota store building a playground in their community. Like my father said, we've learned that we can't outgrow our people. Our culture's strong, but we spend time nurturing it each and every day. It serves as a guide for our teams, and it attracts new team members that are looking for an environment in which they can flourish. I have a quote on a Post-it note in my office. I've had it for 7 years. It was true then, it's true today, and I'll keep it for the next generation. Culture Eats Strategy for Breakfast by Peter Drucker. Before I conclude, I'd like to circle back to our stakeholder philosophy and talk about the communities we do business in as a stakeholder of RDO. We make a conscious effort to help our communities in the ways we best can, and in those ways, we feel like we become better corporate citizens. In our last employee survey, 90% of our team members agree with the statement, "I feel good about the ways we contribute to our community." In our stores, we have boards that list where team members have voted to give money and where they choose to spend their volunteer time. As an organization, we annually give every team member $200 and 8 hours of paid volunteer time to spend in their communities. This amounts to over $1 million spent every year. It's promoted widespread pride in the organization by team members going beyond what the organization offers and donating their own time and money to local causes. By building awareness of the community stakeholder, we've raised our social awareness. I'll conclude by going back to some of what my father talked about. As a public company, we got caught up in a shareholder-centric approach, whereby a lot of the leadership decisions made were wondering how the decision was going to impact the stock price. We transitioned to a stakeholder approach where we believe that serving all of our stakeholders is the best way to produce long-term results and create a growing, prosperous company. Our leaders today focus on serving our employees and our customers, believing, like I do, that the other stakeholders, including the shareholders, then get taken care of. And a company's culture is the single biggest differentiator between you and your competition. So to end, I'd like to ask how many of you had the great fortune of hearing Bill Gates speak here a couple of weeks ago? Wow. President Kraft referenced Bill Gates being a lifelong learner. That really resonated with me. Life really is a process of learning. I've spent a lot of time talking about the things that I think we've done right, but trust me, we have a ways to go. Whether it's a customer survey that shows a communication gap or an employee exit interview that highlights an issue, I'm reminded this is a journey of continuous improvement. Thank you so much for the opportunity today. It's been an honor.
Christi has agreed to take some questions, and my associate Jim Legler will be moving among you with a microphone, so please speak up.
Hey, John, why don't you use this?
Which year did you go from being public to private, and what kind of hurdles did you go through to get there?
It's a better question for him than me, actually. So, we were public from 1997 to June of 2003. And as far as the actual process to take the private, I would ask you to answer that. Yeah.
I had to borrow a lot of money from Bell State Bank.
Where's Michael?
How's that for a plug, Mike? It was a very interesting process at the time that I made the decision. all of the directors, who were all my friends, immediately had to recluse themselves from me, or I had to recluse myself from them. They went through an appraisal process done by an outside appraiser, and I think it was Houlihan Lokey. And they put a price on the stock, and it was either pay it or forget it. Most generally, what happens in a deal like that, and there's all kinds of law firms out there that live and breathe on these things that cause shareholder lawsuits. The outside board did such an outstanding job in their work. There wasn't a lawsuit or anything that was raised on the deal. So that was the process.
Got one here from Dennis.
Thanks, Jim. I'm a male in an organization of predominantly female employees. My boss is a female. I've had board chairman as female. And I guess my approach is I don't really pay too much attention to that. I just act, I'm just myself. How have you found that, because you're really in the opposite situation, a female in a world of mostly, I think, men employees in your stores?
There's a lot of really strong RDO women that are in this crowd. And great men that. It is a very male-dominated industry, and the significant majority of the team members in our organization are certainly, I don't know, 1/3 of the team members in our organization are actually what we call technicians, and it was certainly maybe a hurdle at some point in time, but I don't know how to answer that. We've got great women in our organization, in our field support office, and we look at ourselves as a very collaborative team, and we've got men in our organization that are tremendous to work with. So I don't know how else to answer that. So.
Thank you.
Well, I'm a person who grew up with a father who was in the same business that I am, and there was a point where I felt like kind of an imposter because I didn't understand what he understood about agriculture or writing. And I'm wondering, did you go through a process of deciding that when you would have the confidence? Your dad here has said that nobody was really interested in the equipment business. What was the process of convincing yourself that you were going to be a player in this?
That's a great question. So I went to law school, and very, very early on, I knew that I was going to be a terrible attorney. But I'm not a quitter. So I made my way through law school, knowing I was getting a great education, but that I didn't want to be an attorney. So I actually went to work for a law firm in Minneapolis after I graduated, and that was right around the time that my father was taking the equipment company public. And so I had a very good mentor in Minneapolis, and he said, if you come to work for me, you'll learn a lot more, because the idea was to do all these acquisitions, and you'll learn a lot more than you would pushing paper in a law firm. And so I quickly jumped on board and was working for him, but I kept really getting lured into the operations. It was where I quickly found a passion. I learned a lot by not having direct responsibility for how to do things right and the wrong way. So I quickly had a passion. I said we're in the service business, we're in the customer solutions business, but we're really in the people business. And for a long time, I've loved the people that we've worked with, and quickly felt like there was something I could do to add value to the culture of the organization, and that's where my passion led to my path. So, yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Hiram's got a question.
I've known Christi since she's been in diapers. And the thing that really struck me about her is, this was down on the South University office, and I came in one day and I said, "What's your goal?" "I'm going to be president." And I thought, pretty cocky.
How old was I?
But you said, "I'm going to be president," and I thought, yes, and I never skipped me. That has stuck with me all along. You've had the confidence, and you've got the strength of character to do it.
Thank you, Hiram. I'm a little bit competitive, like my father as well. Thank you.
I'm moving over here to Mike Sleddy.
Well, just a comment first. These sessions all year have been fabulous, and you've certainly kept the standard high, so thank you for sharing your story.
Thank you.
One of the things, a great culture and high employee satisfaction, I can only assume means really low employee turnover. Can you talk about that part of the business and if that's truly played out in that fashion?
Yeah, we measure turnover, and we also listen to a lot of anecdotal evidence too. We're in a tough industry. We're in a tough geography for attracting and retaining people. So we look at it very carefully. But we do know, and the way we measure it, that we absolutely have lower turnover than others in our industry. So.
Another question? Excuse me.
You obviously have a deep passion for culture, and I was wondering, aside from the experience of the overemphasis on quarterly results as a public company, how did you happen to come by that passion that culture eats strategy for breakfast?
Thank you.
I'm a big reader, so I've read a lot of books. I've reached out and asked a lot of questions of people, and reached out and had some mentors along the way, one of which is my father. He'd built a great business long before I came around, and so he's got the same passion for people that I do. So it was, and surrounding myself with great people. I was very lucky when I got into my position, actually, as the division vice president before the operating officer. I had great people that, and it kind of goes back to the earlier question of a woman in our industry. I asked a lot of questions. I admitted what I didn't know, and I was given the benefit of the doubt by some great team members. So. But, part of it is intuitive, but part of it is certainly, it's just the right thing to do, and the stakeholder approach has just worked really, really well for our organization, so.
Got a question back here?
Christi, I work for the church, and we'd like to hire you. I'm convinced that if the church would put these same principles together, and we had somebody like you running the church, I think we'd reform this country in 5 years.
Christi, could you, just my own question here, as you take a look at people going into management, younger people, what advice could you, I like your idea of continual learning, values, what advice could you give them?
I think that they need to seek out learning opportunities, whether it's an internship or a travel experience or what have you, and just be open to new ideas and new things, and reach out and grab those mentors that they can to help them grow. So,
You said you read a lot. What kind of things do you read that really has inspired you over the last few years?
you know, I really wanted to understand. We were not an open book company. So to understand what an open book company was, I read the Open Book Management book. It's the kind of the classic Open Book Management 101. John Case, I think, is the author. I mentioned after I sat through Michael Solberg's lecture a couple months ago, I read Conscious Capitalism by John Mackey, which was great because it validated he talks a lot about this stakeholder integration approach, and so that really resonated with me. The book I'm in the middle of, maybe you've noticed this with my public speaking, but I'm actually an introvert, and a fellow introvert teammate gave me the book Quiet, which is about introverts' impact and how they can impact the world. It's a great book, actually. I'm about halfway through it. So a great book that I just finished, especially for women in businesses, is the book by Lean In by Sheryl Sandberg, which has been getting a lot of attention lately, I thought was a fantastic book. So yeah, I do a lot of reading, mostly based on recommendations from others. So
Okay. Thank you for all the wisdom.
thank you, Jim. Thank you, Dr. Bell.
Christi mentioned that I'd had a chance to serve on the board of RDO for about 9 years. It was a great experience. And one of the impressions that I had of Christi during that period of time was her sort of laser-like focus. Her laser-like focus on people, her laser-like focus on education, on empowerment, so that the RDO promise was not just a poster, it's a reality. What they say is what they do, which reflects the fact that what Christi says is what she does. There is a kind of underlining credibility in that enterprise that is so important. You know, I reflect on the fact that RDO and Christi, and there's a consistency among several of the people that we've heard from during this series. They've been family enterprises based in this community. So I think we have something going here about the importance of family in free enterprise and the importance of community in supporting free enterprise. So all of you today, as members of this community, I think, should receive tribute for being part of an organization, part of a community that nurtures these qualities of community, these qualities of excellence in terms of our business and our free enterprise in this community. So thank you very much for this. This has been really a tribute to you today, Christi, and a tribute to RDO, and a tribute to the RDO sitting right here. So thank you all very much.